Hello and welcome back to another Demis Hellen tutorial. We're going to look at pad temporal from an upcoming pack, pads and plucks that I'll be releasing on the website. If you're not already subscribed to the mailing list, you can do so over at my website, or you can just follow on Facebook and YouTube. And this pack features 10 pads and 10 plucks that you can use together or just totally independently. It's entirely up to you. But there's a unique sound to the pad temporal, and I want to show you what it sounds like, and then we'll recreate not the preset but just the idea of how it was built to create that effect. So let's hold these notes and just see what is happening with this pad. So we can hear that it has a gated effect, but then it seems to reverse, and there's no trickery in there, there's no outboard effects that are actually making that happen. It is all internal within Sylenth as well, because that's what the pack is made in. So jumping into our initialized preset, which sounds a bit deadmousey just because of the first chord and the fact that it's just a saw wave. Sounds brilliant. So if you want to create anything deadmau5, there you go. That is the tutorial complete. Thumbs up and drop me a comment if you want to see more deadmau5 tutorials. Anyway, jokes aside, we're going to look at creating a basic pad. So turning retrig off, we're just going to use part A, oscillator 1 for now. I'm going to turn that up to 8, increase the detune, and we're just going to create a pad sort of shape, long release, little bit of an attack that's a bit slower. And it has a bit of release, that is fine. I'm going to add cutoff A as a low pass, increase the drive to give it a bit of warmth. And it sounds good. Now the MIDI notes are a little bit low, so I'm just going to turn this up 1 octave so I don't have to go into the MIDI. Perfect. So we're not worried about the sound design and how great it sounds. We just want to get a sort of ballpark figure so we can actually start making the effect. So let's have a look at LFO1, because this is the main section that controls the gate aspect. Leaving it to run on a tempo base, we're going to turn the rate to 1/8. So we're looking up here at this section where the mouse is. And we're going to go to 1/8. So now we have that based on the tempo of the track. It's 132 BPM, and we're going to get a nice steady gated sound. And what we're going to do is attach this to cutoff A, increase the gain, and switch this to a saw wave, and we'll get this. So now we're getting a gated sound just by holding the notes because the LFO is taking care of that. So let's quickly explain what's happening here. So starting with the wave, we have a saw wave which starts at essentially 100% volume down to 0%, and that runs on a cycle of 1/8 notes, and that's giving us our constant steady pluck. The gain is turning up how much the LFO is going to control, so how hard it's going to be. This down here is the range, so how far round the cutoff is it going to reach. So if we turn this up, it's going to go from this point to absolute full open filter. And if we reduce this, you'll hear this have a shorter range to the point that we can have it just moving back and forth in a very small space. Use the gain to control that even further. So it's great to add movement into a pad, into a bass, anything that you want, and you can make it as subtle as you want. So we're going to turn the gain up, turn the cutoff to about 2 o'clock, and we'll have the gain a little bit lower for now, so we've just got a very subtle input. Maybe just there. And the reason for this is because LFO2 is going to control the LFO1. So the best way to explain this before we jump in is I'm going to open up Node. And I've already got a sine wave loaded in here. So what we can see here is 0 and this is no sound at all, straight down the middle. And then either side we have 2 bumps. And the first one is actually a positive value, so that can be 100% volume, full loudness, and then gradually goes down to 0 at this point. And then this one is -1, which would go the opposite way, which would be -100, so the total opposite to this. So you can see that's going to move at a certain rate, and we're going to set that to 2 bars. So that's going to move through 2 bars, and it's going to make the volume rise up, and then it's going to make it go quiet. And then you'll see what happens when it goes into this dip here, because if it's not going full volume, what's happening in this section? So let's have a look. So we've got the sine wave set up already as default, and we're going to set this to a rate of 2/1, which is 2 bars. So again, up here, look in there, 2 bars, 2/1. And we're going to set the gain quite high up so we can hear exactly what's happening. And we're going to set the first control section to LFO1 gain. So really all we've done is attached LFO2 to this gain. And if we increase this to, say, 2 o'clock, we're going to hear a unique effect. You can hear that we get a reverse sound. So what's happening here is LFO1 gain is being controlled by the LFO. When the gain is set to that low level, it can go upwards. So this saw wave is actually attacking 100% of volume to 0 volume, which gives us our gate effect. If we reverse that, we actually get a saw wave going the opposite way from 0 to 100. So we actually get a rise in volume. And depending on the speed that LFO is working at, that's how the sound will be perceived. Jumping back into node, we can see full volume, so we're going to get that nice gated effect like this. And then when it gets to here, it's actually then reversing that saw wave and making it rise in volume instead of starting at full volume. And when we hold the note, it goes back, down. So you can hear and see the process that is actually happening. And the reason I've chosen Sylenth is 1, because it's part of the pack, and 2, it's easier for demonstration purposes because there's a limited amount of things that we can actually modulate, which makes it easy to understand. And then with that said, we can turn oscillator 1 volume right down, and we can have this, which is nothing. And what we want to do is create velocity sensitivity. So we're going to choose MISC1 and choose velocity. Then we're going to choose volume A, and then we're just going to turn the source up to 100%. So what we've got now is velocity sensitive notes, so we can hit them hard and get full volume, or we can hit them gently and get a lower volume. Now we can add a few sparkly touches. So first things first, we can assign the mod wheel and attach that to cutoff A. Turn that all the way up, so now from that point to that point is our mod wheel. So we can have an option just to have solid chords. And that can create some really interesting effects as well, especially when you're creating breakdowns and build-ups and things like that, especially in trance and sort of the progressive genres. We're going to jump over to part B, and we're going to set up part B just a little bit differently in the way that we're just going to use noise. And the reason for this is we're going to attach volume B to this LFO so we can create a little bit of white noise on the top. So at the moment we won't hear anything. If we just turn this up an absolute smidge, so look up here, we get a little bit of white noise introduced. So let's introduce a little bit more. So it's a little bit too much, so I'm just going to turn that down again to about 300. Now we can add a little bit of sparkle into the sound. So let's start with delay, and we're going to chop some of the lows out. I'm going to leave it on the same time in there, and we're just going to increase the feedback, increase the width. Let's turn that on, and let's just see how that ties over. It's starting to tie over nicely. That's a nice subtle effect, not too much. And we can actually use that as sort of a reverb. It's more of a tail sort of sound that we're trying to create rather than a sort of obvious echo effect. Now let's add a little bit of reverb. I'm not a massive fan of the reverb in Sylenth, and you can obviously turn this off when you are adding your own in, but let's just create it for effect here. So we're going to turn off pre-delay, increase the dampening so the higher frequencies are just chopped a little bit. I'm going to turn the width down a little and increase the size. Let's just bring that down as well. So now, turn it off. Just a little bit of reverb there, not my favourite, but it just adds to a bit of atmosphere depending on what you're trying to create. And finally, let's add a little bit of phasing in just to create some more movement. I'm going to turn the dry wet down just so it's not invasive. Decrease the width. And I'm going to offset this a little bit so we get a bit more obvious movement. Spread, and we're going to change the center frequency here whilst it's playing. And I think we'll leave everything where it is. Maybe the feedback will go up. And that makes a great pad because we have movement in the LFOs, and then we have another LFO creating movement in that LFO, and then we have the velocity sensitivity on the main oscillator, so it gives even more control over the depth and sound of the pad. And then we also have the effects adding on top of that, so you can see the layers that we're adding to create a pad, and this creates more interest. And this creates a more interesting sound for your mix. So let's have a listen to the final version and we'll just play the chords out. And there we go, we've created a pad with movement in multiple layers, but the main focus was using the two LFOs together to create that reverse effect. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know down in the comments. Also hit the like button and the subscribe button so you get to see all the uploads. The bell icon does help if you want to see them before anybody else and kind of get first dibs on the comments. And thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.